Well, welcome, Greg. Greg Campbell. It's great to be on the podcast with you today. Greg, we go back almost a decade, and over that time, and currently, you've been an advisor, an investor, a board member of our business. So many ways our lives have intersected, and you've had an extremely interesting career, both on the ownership side and on the leadership side. So we'll talk about that today.
Yep.
And you've written a few books, and we're going to talk about those. And we're going to talk about what you see happening in the world and what you're excited about and interested in today.
Thank you, Joe. It's just a pleasure for me to be here with you. I so have enjoyed all these years that you and I and Ryan have spent together working toward your success, and you are successful. But I remember when I started and when I first met you, what an interesting experience it was to get to know the two of you, because when I first went to your office, I said, this is like a Motel 6 office building.
Yeah.
And it was on like the second floor, and it was a small building in Modesto. And it was like, who are these guys? What do they do? And someone had said we should meet and talk, not knowing that from that initial meeting would come this opportunity that we've had over the intervening number of years to see your own business grow, expand, evolve, change, become much more successful. And having the dreams that you and Ryan have had from those early days to become something significantly more. So It's been fun to be on the journey with you and fun to be a part of encouraging you. And that's why I'm grateful to be here today and just sit down and share with you. And I love that I get to watch every other time that you guys have done your podcast. I always like to say, okay, what nugget of truth, what nugget of information, what nugget of learning can I get from Joe and Ryan on their podcast? So I'm grateful. Thank you for having me.
One idea I've really loved over the years is the idea of the both and. So many conversations we've had have been like, well, do we do this or do we do this?
Yeah.
And the answer is always, I guess you're sort of saying it's in the middle, but the both and means these two things are not exclusive. You can reduce costs and increase revenue somehow. You can do this hard thing and that hard thing.
Mm-hmm.
Let's think about how to do a difficult thing, two difficult things, in the same way. Maybe you can talk to that idea.
Immediately when you say that, what comes to my mind is what has shaped my own career and my thinking as a leader for decades. And that is that the fundamental first question always is, why are we doing what we're doing today?
Yeah.
Not why did we do it yesterday or last week or last year, but contextually, why are we doing this today for our business? And that's really what you just posited was the both and is about, why do we do it? And if we do it, that maybe we can do both of these things. Maybe it is a both and. Not always, but many times. And so success comes from being able to ask not just the why question, but then inevitably what you're addressing is the second important question was, well, what can we do better? And in better means not just doing it the same, and it doesn't mean different necessarily. It might evolve into something different, but the premise is understanding our why so we can do better. And I think that's what's underpinning my philosophy and my own personal career. But as I help companies like yours, is to help define that why and to disclose and discover what the better is.
And you, over the last almost a decade, have really shaped the culture of leadership in our firm. And let me talk about that, because people listening, I want them to know that this has been groundbreaking. Mm-hmm. The leadership style that I have personally learned from you over the years is a listening style of leadership. And the thing you just talked about, the why, like today we have 70 people. Mm-hmm. And a series of managers, and the way we lead is less of a tell and more of a listen. And the way you've coached me and Ryan and our leadership team over the years is how we really do it in this firm. So often I walk into people's offices and I sit there and I start with, how are you doing and what's on your mind? And even though this is a leadership sort of informal meeting, what I'm really asking is verbalize your fears, say the things you're concerned about, put them out there. And then I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to listen and I'm going to say, just like you've done to all of us, well, what are you thinking about? What's your plan? What do you, most, these people know their situation and their problem better than I will. But if they can be affirmed, if they can take a vague part of their brain and articulate it, they'll make better decisions. And that is honestly a piece that you have put into our company.
Thank you. I think you mentioned 3 words in what you just said that I think are really critical. The first word was culture and how the culture works. And we can talk about that a little bit. The second word you used was listening and being an active listener. That's really important too. And learning how to do these things effectively can really fundamentally shift how we then lead an organization to go forward. And when you've learned to do that, that's really important. But the third word you said becomes part of the others, and that's affirmation. Now, let's use that first for just a minute to explain what I mean. Affirmation in and of itself can be good, but it's usually not good enough for a leader to do when they're working, building a culture and building a listening part of who we are. And the reason for that is it's always done in conjunction with challenge. Because if the why, what can we do better premise holds true, then the affirm, what I call the affirm challenge, affirm principle comes into play. Because the challenge is to say, not only how do I challenge you to be better, but am I then willing as a listener to be challenged myself, how to be better? Now, I've never met anyone, and I've worked with leaders all across the world, very senior leaders. I've never met one yet that didn't need affirmation. So if we know that successful people need affirmation, even when they say they don't, but it turns out they do, then we know everybody in our organization needs affirmation. But we always want to be careful we're not just affirming and blowing the proverbial smoke, but rather it's authentic and real, but it's conjunction with a challenge to continue to be better, continuous improvement. And that really becomes important. Listening becomes, what did the person really say? I know the words you used, but here's what I think you're really saying. Just this week, I met with some folks, some leaders, and that very topic came up. And they said, how did you know that, Greg? I didn't say that. And I said, well, you didn't use those words, but in fact, you did say these words because I'm listening carefully, not only to the exact words you use, but the tonality, your body language are all part of how we communicate and being aware of that. And then going again to the first word, culture, that's an interesting term because in my career, the last job I had was turning around a large international company, Coldwell Banker Corporation. And when I was asked to do that job, I said, I don't know anything about that business. Franchising, relocation, mortgage, real estate transactional things in residential. And the people who were hiring me said, but Greg, you know how to do 2 things really, really well. 1, you know how to make money. That's always important if you're a business leader. And 2, you know how to affect culture. I didn't need to know the specifics of how to do things, but being a good listener, knowing how to give affirmation and challenge, affecting culture, we were able to take a company that was losing $100 million a year, and in 3 years making money, and by year 4, we're making $100 million a year. That did not happen by accident. It happened with intentionality. And with this very words you used, and I'm going to suggest when you use those 3 words as you were sort of doing this introduction, you hadn't fully processed the exact words, how I would respond to those. But they triggered me because those are words that are really important to me.
What I love about your story, and it's certainly something I really respect about you, is there's plenty of leaders and executives, but at some point, you and I guess 7 others, including a large wealthy family, bought Coldwell Banker Corporation from Sears. You led a turnaround, and then you sold it.
Then we sold it.
So you took all the money you had, raised additional money, and bought a now internationally famous brand, and we're one of 7 owners.
That's exactly right. And people ask me all the time, well, why did you sell? Or why didn't you keep doing something? Well, we don't always know why these things happen, even though I asked that question too. It's the why question. But I had accomplished the task of turning this company around with some really good help. We had to do some very difficult things, and we had to do it quickly. And here's a company of 50,000 people working in 80 countries. It's a massive kind of thing. But what I enjoyed most there and subsequently, and after we sold, I'm still young, but I'd been blessed in a way that I didn't need to work financially anymore. But there's still a stewardship for me, obligation of, I've been gifted in a way. How can I come alongside other essentially younger leaders who have aspirational parts of them that want to succeed in a significant way?
Yeah.
And how do we blend those together? And that's what I've been doing the last 2 or 3 decades. And I love it. And that's where I get my joy, because it's vicarious now, because I'm not running anything and doing the thing myself. But when I see what you and Ryan have accomplished, Joe, from when I first met you to where you are today, that was, you're at a place where you were dreaming about, but now you're there. Now your dreams have expanded and you look even further down the road to what you want to be, but where you've come from. And that's why it's an important lesson as well, that periodically we take some time to reflect on where we've come from.
Yeah.
Now we don't obsess on it, but we reflect on it to learn it's a good thing to remember what it was like and where I was, because I know I've been making these better choices all along.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean we don't have some up and downs. Everybody does. Every organization does. But if I track it, your company has moved in an incredible way from where you were.
There's some real charity or maybe charity is not quite the word, but when you started with us, we were a small real estate brokerage company. And every week we talked about cash flow.
Right.
Every call we ever had was like, oh, we just need more cash flow. And, today we lead our fourth real estate fund, and
yep.
There's about $600 million worth of buildings in those various funds. And it's a different enterprise. It still has some of the same ups and downs. But what's interesting is because of your background, you had the expertise and ability, but also compassion to spend time with a much smaller business, even as you do today, even as you will for what's to come. And I've always appreciated that about you. Like you've been there, you've been constant, and you've never spoken down to us. You've always like gotten on the phone and said, "What's on your mind today?" And you just sit there after you ask that question, and we better have something good to talk about, but something good always comes out of it. And I really appreciate the way you've approached that over so many years.
Thank you, Joe. And there is this sense that when we have these conversations, if there's a nugget of truth, a nugget of value, a nugget of maybe there's something else we could consider. But I think you probably also remember from those very earliest days meeting you and Ryan, there was something about you that convinced me that you guys were going to do well. And I told you that often when you're having these cash flow problems, I would say, it's going to be okay. I believe in you. I said, I really do believe in you guys. And it was true. I don't do that because it was truly because I was convinced that the two of you had the giftedness and the heart and the desire to build a corporation or build a company with great culture that was going to make a difference in your world and be hugely financially successful. Now, we're
working on that part?
Working on that part. But you're working on it. But from where you started to where you are is radically different in a good way. And that's why I'm just affirming you and Ryan and Graceada, because this is a company that is on the move. And it's been exciting for me to be this sort of person on the edges that gets to observe it and see how you're applying these different principles each and every week to become better and more successful along the way. And if success is measured on money terms, that's a part of it. But I would say, again, back to culture, part of your success has been the commitment that two of you have to affecting the culture, not only of your employees and the environment you work in, but the community at large. There's things that you do that you say, this is part of how we give back. And that's the holistic person that I always look for. I don't want somebody who's only focused on themselves.
Yeah.
And what you have done, for example, with your scholarship program for the kids that are first gen and the most in need. I have a son-in-law who's a first gen Mexican American.
Yeah.
And he's written about what it was like to be undocumented.
Yeah.
And so when I hear that you're doing that very same thing, and I think, well, I've got my granddaughter's a daughter of a man who came in the same way.
Yeah.
Now he's got 3 degrees and he's very successful in his own way, but it wasn't always there. He had a tough time figuring it out. And so when I hear that you do things like that, and I know that you do, I'm saying, folks, this is the company that you need to be connected to because there's something about them that's extra special.
What's interesting is we had our board meeting this morning, and it was quite a board meeting. There's a lot to talk through, but I looked around the table, and for those watching, you can look at our board on our website. But it's a pretty amazing board. Like I'm surprised they let me in the room to talk to these people. But I think 4 of the 5 are people that we met through you or were part of your circle. And you wrote this book called The Coil. And I can't help but think of all the ways our lives have coiled, and that's certainly a very important one of them.
No, it's really true. And your board is outstanding, the people you've put together. And that fits with one of the other pieces of advice I've given you over the years, which is, on your employees, you hire up. You hire better than what you think you need. And I've said the same thing when you're putting your board together, go after really, really good people. And I think you said something like initially, well, why would they want to be part of our board? And in my experience, has been really good people want to be attached to people who have aspirationally decided they want to be really good too. And they're more than willing to walk alongside. And so when you look at the qualifications of your board, it's like, for your size firm, it's out of this world. And that's a great benefit to the whole company.
Thank you.
No, but it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And you have benefited
tremendously
since you put that group together. And they each bring different skill sets, which is really special because that was the design. You don't bring in people that are exactly the same. So you've got an entrepreneur who's done a hugely successful. You've got a major banker. You've got another entrepreneurial person in the finance world. You have someone in the pension fund. I mean, these are all people that are highly gifted and highly skilled, but married together give you great value.
Great advice and a lot of pushes. There's always the challenge of building something from scratch, and like what got you to here won't get you to there.
Right.
The person I was 5 years ago to be in working leads on the phone, like it's a different issue. There's different things to do today. You have to keep leveling up. And to your advice on upgrading the team, we have we've been through a lot of people. We have a really solid group right now, but we've always leaned into I've always just thought, what am I most afraid to do right now? That's probably what I need to do.
And at the board meeting today, you mentioned one of the people in the room of your employees that was a multiple better than the predecessor.
Yeah.
And when that predecessor was hired, however, you said, this is a step up from where we were.
Yeah.
And that's the premise, is to say, this isn't about the individual person or the personhood of that person.
No.
This is about capacity for where we are today and where we want to be next month, next year, and 5 years. And so you've done the hard work of continuing to, when opportunity presents itself, you found better people to fill those roles that elevated your company's capacity.
The thing we've been learning over and over is that we're not a family, we're a team.
Yeah.
And with teams, you have a fiduciary role. I mean, we certainly have a fiduciary role to our investors and our funds and our company, to our employees, to have the very best talent we can have at the time we need them.
Right.
And to do this out of kindness and respect.
Yeah.
Everyone who's walked through these doors, we respect, and I respect, or they wouldn't be here. But it's the day that I or Ryan the day we stop making hard decisions is the day our days are numbered.
Right.
Those are the days when we should be the leaders we need to be. So those are lessons that you've helped us learn, and they've often been painful. But we were able to have the board meeting we had today and have the company worthy of those board members because of just over and over facing into the pain.
Right. Pain is an important part of growth. I know you've been one to keep physically fit and doing a lot of different things. It comes and goes. But the point of that is, as a person of that, when there's pain and there's tension is when we get stronger.
Yeah.
Now, too much pain and too much tension tears apart muscle and breaks it down. But we're trying to build those muscles. But to build them, if I just don't do anything, they deteriorate.
Yeah.
And we want to keep our muscle, as it were, our corporate muscle strong.
Yeah.
And that comes through some of these difficult things of tension and that are meant to build us into something healthier and better.
I like the ideas of holding things loosely.
Yep.
That may have been one of your things.
Yeah, we do. Hold it loosely.
Hold it loosely.
Have an open palm, open hand.
Dave Ramsey always says if you hold something too tightly, you lose use of your hand.
Right.
And then also the idea of don't think, just do, which is also great for cold calls. Like, well, what am I going to say? Well, don't just dial and start talking.
It's so true. I was advising and have been an advisor to a university president. And one time we were having this conversation in his office, and he was bemoaning how many different speeches he had to do. He said, I take all this time to prepare all these speeches. I'll never forget, I said to him, no, you shouldn't be doing all that.
Yeah.
Because I know you well enough to know you know it here.
Yeah.
And although it may be slightly different for different audiences, the core of your message stays the same. So you don't need to spend a lot of time prepping. But he was so intent that he had everything just perfect, but he already really knew it. And it freed him up from a major university to go about doing what he needed to do.
Yeah.
And that's really what we're saying here as well, is go do it. And that's what I was saying to him. You can do it because I know you know it. It's here. It's inside of us.
Yeah. Well, we're going to wrap up, but I will shamelessly advertise your books so that you don't have to. I've read both of these. They're excellent. The Coil and the 5-2-1 Principle. I do recommend them. You can buy them on Amazon, as I have.
That's right.
These might be my copies. But it has been a privilege and an honor. Seriously, it's been a career shaper for me to get to work with you. And I look forward to another decade and a lot of great meetings and glasses of wine and board dinners and a lot of fun. Life and business are a journey, and it's great to be on the journey with people you respect and love to some extent. So thank you.
Again, thank you, Joe. And it's really good to be here.
Likewise.